What we're doing is we are continuing a series that we are calling Imprinted. Imprinted, the idea that, I don't know, I kind of think we're like a thumbprint kind of idea. We each have unique thumbprints. Well, as a Vineyard church, we are actually, and some people don't know this, is that we're not the only Vineyard church around. The Vineyard is part of a movement of churches. There's about 500 Vineyard churches here in the United States. We've been around since the late 70s, early 80s kind of thing. And so I actually think we just celebrated our 50th anniversary as a movement of churches. But there's some things that, we can clap for that. That's good. Right? We're happy, God has definitely imprinted some things into the Vineyard Church as a movement. And that's what we want to look at throughout October. It's just some of the things that God has planted in us as a movement at large, but also as an individual church. Who are we as the Vineyard? What are we about? That's really what we want to look at. It's going to be helpful for each of you guys who are here just to know, hey, what kind of, maybe you're new, and it's like, hey, what kind of church is this? That's what we're going to talk about the next 4 weeks, or the next 3 weeks. We did last week. You can check out the first week. Ed Mullaney talked about worship the first week, and so you can look at that. You find that on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. You can check it out. But it's a little bit about who we are, but it's also a way, if you've been here for a while and you know who we are as a Vineyard, it's a great reminder. Let's say you invited somebody to church, or somebody says, hey, you go to church on a Sunday. What kind of church is it? You're able to kind of talk a little bit about, say, hey, we're a people who worship God. We're passionate worshipers of God. Today we'll talk about the idea of mercy, that we are a church who extends mercy to those who are outside of us, those who come into the wall, come into the church. We're involved in compassionate ministries, things like feeding the poor and clothing those who need clothes. And so we're people of mercy. Next week we'll talk about the realities that we are as a church and as a movement. We're people who are partnering with the Holy Spirit in God's ongoing mission in this world. And the last week we will, John Elmer, who is our senior regional leader in the Vineyard, he'll be talking about the kingdom of God. We are a kingdom of God people. And so that's what we're going to be talking about over this month of October. So glad. So join us each week. We'd love to have you guys here each week. And as you see, as the picture tells you, today, a man who maybe to some need no introduction, but to others maybe you do. It's going to be our founding pastor, the one who planted this church and started this church, Lou Federico. So Lou's going to be sharing with us today.
All right. Good morning, everyone. It's great to have you all here with us this morning. And, it's great, actually, we're doing these series. I just love these series, of course. There's something that really, grounds us, I do believe, particularly as a church together. Who we are, what we're about, why we do what we do, these type of things, why we think the way we think sometimes. Maybe a little different, but it's cohesive. It's something within the context of who the Vineyard is as a whole and who we are as a church. And so it really is important to us. You probably experienced some of the things that we've been talking about. I mean, really are not new necessarily, but they are things that probably were dialing up to your attention. You've seen already here in the church if you've been here for a while. If you're visiting, hopefully, and you stick around, you'll see basically within the context of the church. But really it is us. It's like any one of your families. If somebody was to, get into the Mullaney family over here, they'd say, oh man, the Mullaney's do it like this. This is how the Mullaney's are. Kind of thing. No, I don't want to do it that way. No, I'm only joking. But they're a great family. Okay, I would want to do it their way. But, and so it's just it's who we are as a people. Particularly who we are as a people together. And so these are some of my favorite topics. My wife and I, we have been part of the Vineyard for 40 years. So some 40 years, of course. And in that time, we have done a lot of traveling with the Vineyard as a whole. The guy who started the Vineyard, I don't like to use the word started, the guy who kind of ran the Vineyard for the first time was a guy named John Wimber. He started really the whole thing, pretty much in terms of its church growth and whatnot. We not only have 500 churches in the United States, we have actually 2,500 churches all over the world. There's over 2,500 vineyards really all over the world. And because missions is a big part of who we are, going out and, as John used to say, doing the stuff of the Bible. He said he read the Bible, and he says, and he always, first time he went to church, he he wasn't a Christian, he was an atheist, and he would go to church, and he read a little, somebody had given a Bible, so he was reading it and reading the Gospels, and he said, and he saw this stuff that they were doing in the Gospels, so he thought that when he went to church, he says, he got out of church, and he asked a friend, and he says, well, that was nice, but he goes, when are they going to do the stuff? What stuff? The stuff I see in the Bible, that stuff, that when are they going to, why didn't, and so he'd go back the next week and waiting for them to do the stuff of the Gospels. And, of course, then he, became a Christian, and then did teaching, oh my God, and then, of course, became the head of the Vineyard churches, and just saw it grow like crazy. Like I say, we traveled quite a bit with the Vineyard. We all over the United States. Ray just came back from Colorado, one of our favorite places to go when we were first starting out as pastors. Matter of fact, our eldest, who's actually took his first steps out in Colorado, in Colorado. So our kids were flying by the time before they were one, going all over the place. But we traveled with John. Matter of fact, we would travel with John to England, Scotland, Germany, Austria, So we traveled all over the place with the Vineyard as John was going about doing these, he called them missions trips, but they were like conference trips. And you saw, every time we would go, we would see something. We would see the similarity between peoples. We would see how John was doing things. We would see how his people were responding to that and how they themselves were taking it to their churches. So oftentimes when you would go to a Vineyard church, I don't care where it is, you would definitely know you're in a Vineyard church, basically. These guys have gone to Vineyard church in Ireland, say, right? And you know it distinctly, it's a Vineyard church. They're just Irish kind of thing, doing their Irish thing. And it's the same. I actually headed the mission for many years down to the Dominican Republic, which when we weren't down there at all, and then I started the mission to the Dominican Republic. And when we were down there, and then guess what? They were Dominicans, but they were Vineyard. They were Vineyard nonetheless. When you would walk into their church, you go, it's a Vineyard. It's La Viña, maybe La Viña, but it was a Vineyard church. And so there was something about it when you went there that you felt the same way from the people. It's just a wonderful. And that's why, when coming from the place I came to and growing up in church, I found home. And matter of fact, we would oftentimes say, how I got into the Vineyard myself, when I was invited to go to a healing seminar up in Kingston. And when I go up to this healing seminar in Kingston, I had been involved already in things like praying for the sick and doing other type ministry, feeding the poor and whatnot. And I go to see the Vineyard for the first time, guys who were coming from Long Island, matter of fact. And when I first came to Christ, I devoured the Bible. I still do. I love the Bible. I teach a Bible study on Monday nights, as a matter of fact, and I just devoured the Bible. And so when I would read the Bible, I would see certain things, and I would see people, how they were interacting and whatnot. And when I went and heard the Vineyard, particularly John's teachings for the first time, I went, oh my goodness, this guy is in my head. When I read the Bible and I see and I interpret, I go, this guy is in my brain. He's saying what I would say. He's kind of doing what I would think should be done. And we talk about church, or the ecclesial model, if you will. And so I found a home. As a matter of fact, and we used to say, back in the old days, we'd say, you don't join the Vineyard. Actually, you find out you are Vineyard. That's how we used to say it. You don't join the Vineyard. There's no joining of the Vineyard. You find out you are Vineyard. This is who you are. It's how you see stuff, how you do things, and whatnot. And so that's my wife and I. And really, and hopefully, and prayerfully, that's what you see here in terms of this church and when we planted it so many years ago. In Luke chapter 10, there is a story, of course, and it should be very familiar to you. And it says this, Luke's talking about Jesus, and it says, and behold, a lawyer. Now, he doesn't mean a lawyer like in a court lawyer. He's talking about a lawyer being a scribe, a lawyer, a Jewish lawyer, who they were separate from the priests and Levites. They didn't have to be a priest or Levite. What they were experts on the Torah. They were experts in Jewish law. They were experts in this kind of thing. So even priests and Levites would go to the lawyers, would go to the scribes to actually get interpretation and things like this. So there's lawyers there, somebody who really knows, supposed to really know the scripture and these kinds of things. It says, behold, the lawyer stood up and put Jesus to the test, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, what is written in the law? How do you read it? This is a good question to a lawyer. And he answered, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, Jesus said to him, you have answered correctly. Do this, and you will live. And then he goes on to him. Let me just take the next part. But he desiring, now the lawyer desiring to justify himself. He wanted to justify himself somehow. In other words, in terms of how he was himself living this out, he wanted to justify himself and said to Jesus, who is my neighbor? Now, why would he ask that question? Who is my neighbor? Because really, what he's doing is by answering correctly, he says he loved the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? That's one way of saying in Matthew. But actually in the original, in Deuteronomy, it doesn't have mind in there, but in Deuteronomy 6 actually is where you find what's called the Shema. Very important to Jewish people. It should be important to us. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You say that's Deuteronomy 6:4. And right after that, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might, he says. And he goes on, basically. I'm not going to go from there. Matter of fact, I think we should do a series or a topic on that, creating D6 families. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk about them. Anyway, I won't go any further. I get off topic. But what is that though? That is when the rabbis used to teach and the lawyers would talk about the 10 Commandments, they would split it up. And the first part of it would be loving God. Okay? The second part would come from Leviticus 19:18. Anybody who's done my Bible study knows these already. I should have my Bible study guys come up and actually Leviticus 19:18, right? You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. Now, what's different in that? There's a little bit of a difference. It says, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against who? The sons of your own people. Oh, your own people. Other Jewish people. But you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, right? And I think there's some part of that we should take to ourselves, particularly unless Jesus actually is kind of changing things up here just a little bit. Because why? Because as kingdom people, how do people know what it's like to be in relationship with God? They have to be able to see it. How are they to see it? Right here. Through us. We are his representatives. We are his representatives of the kingdom of God itself. What it's like, how to live it out, how we would treat one another. And this is the point. That's how Christianity really got its power, particularly during the Roman Empire. They would look into the community and say, what is up with those people? And the whole empire was changed because of it. Okay? But here he's saying he wants to justify himself. Why? Because he's saying what? He goes, oh, right. As a lawyer, he's saying, I'm to love my neighbor, right? One of my own. One of my own, right? He's trying to justify himself in that sense. And so Jesus then replies, if you get the rest of the parable, Jesus replies. A man was going down. He's going to tell him a story. That's how Jesus teaches, right? He's going, okay, fine, let me tell you a story. He goes, there's a man going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among the robbers. Now, this is a Jewish man. He's going from Jerusalem to Jericho. And he fell among robbers, who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. Now, by chance, a priest was going down that road, and when he saw him, he passed him by on the other side. So, likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. Oh, wait a second. Yeah, this priest, a priest of the law, a priest of Judaism, Levite, a priestly class, they actually see one of their brothers, one of their own, in distress, not just somebody else, not even one of the hated amongst them. No, one of their own on the side of the road. They passed on the other side. They wanted nothing to do with it. Did you ever do that, by the way? Walking down, so you see something going on, you're like, okay, I am moving over here. Yeah, no, we're not getting involved in that. No. But, he says, a Samaritan. Who were the Samaritan? The dreaded Samaritans, the hated Samaritans, the enemies of the Jews, if you will. Because they were phony balonies. I mean, these guys were like, just faux Jews almost to some extent. So they hated them. This lowly Samaritan. But the Samaritan, as he journeyed, came to where he was. And when he saw him, he had compassion on him. I love that word there, compassion, because it's actually a very specific word to the word compassion. Because compassion and mercy actually can be flip-flopped in a couple of words, but this one here is used specifically for compassion, and it's used of Jesus' ministry oftentimes too. When he goes to feed the 5,000, when he goes to raise the dead, he had compassion on them. And that word means is he was moved. He was moved, just like your bodily functions, you just have to. There's no choice. I said, no, stop working. It's working. It's doing its thing. And the compassion, they believe, came from here. Came from inside. So in other words, it wasn't, I can't do something. I have a choice to say, no, I have to do something. I must. My compassion. I am moved to it. And that word there speaks of that. And he went to him and bound him up with his wounds. So the Samaritan binds his wounds, pouring oil and wine on him. That's a waste of wine there, but no. But when he said, no, it's all good. It's a good thing. But then he said him, I hope it wasn't Montepulciano de Abruzzo. But anyway, let's move on. And he sent him on his own animal. He sent him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii of day's wages and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. Which of these 3, he asked now, the lawyer, the expert in the law, the one everybody goes to for interpretation of the law, you see, trying to justify himself in terms of things he does, things he doesn't do. You see. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be the neighbor to this man? Who really was his neighbor? And he says, the one who showed mercy, he says. And Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. Go and do the same thing. Who showed mercy? By the way, in that word mercy there, a little different than the word compassion earlier. It just simply means, literally, it's mercy, but not just pity, but it is to show mercy. I'm going to show my mercy. Not I'm just going to have some pity for somebody. This morning we're going to talk about probably it's a critical element to who we are as a church. but necessarily not maybe as identifiable sometimes, I think, until we just dial it up as we're doing here this morning. And that, of course, is mercy ministry, or we used to call it, basically back in the day, we used to call it compassion, actually, ministry. And here in Luke, the common word, as I said, for mercy is used, and it does mean to show this mercy. And in its ecclesiastical model, it is a model for church. It's a model as the church be. Or, as Jesus is trying to get across to us. Because why? What is the church? If I was to ask you, and how rote and cliche it has become, well, what is the church? People. So the church is people. And so he's talking to people. And these people make up the church. Individuals within the community make up the church. So here's a model in terms of, includes care for the least, care for the lost, and care for the broken. Care for the least, the lost, and the broken. Many of you came here in need of mercy. Many of you came here in need of mercy. Tell the truth. Put your hand up. Okay, you can put them both up. I will. Bada boom, I scored. And so I come here, touchdown. The Giants did beat the Philadelphia Eagles this Thursday. So we know God is a Giant fan. And so the thing is, but nonetheless, many of us came here looking for mercy. And we are in need of this mercy. To be not just have someone to take pity on us, but someone to actually show us mercy. Mercy, I want to look at it in particularly our mercy in terms of the DNA. We're talking about the DNA of the vineyard, if you will. John used to talk about the DNA all the time. And in the DNA, when we think of mercy as part of our DNA, I want to look at it in three parts. Mercy as innate in the character of God, and mercy as inherent in the dealings of God with people, and mercy as incorporated into the people of God. Okay? So when we think about mercy as innate in the character of God, Deuteronomy, matter of fact, Deuteronomy 4:31. You can bring that up so I don't have to look at my notes. It says this, "For the Lord your God is a merciful God. He will not leave you or destroy you or forget the covenant with your fathers that he swore to them." But particularly that first sentence. That first sentence, the Lord your God is a merciful God. Actually, the name of God there. El Rahum. I have to do the thing there because otherwise it's going to sound like El Raccoon. The raccoon. If we're Spanish, they say, oh, the raccoon. El Raccoon. And if we just roll our R's, we change it to, yes, a Latin language. But nonetheless, it's not. It's El, meaning God. El is the Hebrew for God. Rahum. And that word is a very specific word, actually, to tell you the truth. What it means, really, it comes from the word for womb. That sounds kind of interesting. How is the two alike? It is the womb. Why? Because it has the child in a mother's womb. And that child is being cared for. This love of the mother for this child in the womb. Now, who's taking things from the mother. And sometimes can cause little pain to the mother, even in the womb. Anybody who's had, of course, the ladies could tell me, we won't get to that. Right? Laying on the spine, all the different kicking and blah, 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 blah. Hey, I'm feeding you and what do? You kick me. And then, we get all excited. But we get excited with a good kick. We get not so much when it's a bad one. But anyway, what's the point? Erakum, the merciful God, God of mercy, this God of mercy. the one who protects, the one who's caring for, you see, looking after, despite even the hardship that child may cause within the context of the womb. It helps make sense for me, basically, as soon as I look up, of course, Al-Rahum, look that up in Matthew, chapter 23. Basically, it says this. You can put it up. And this is Jesus, and he's overlooking Jerusalem for the last time. He's going to Jerusalem for the last time. And this is what he says as he's overlooking Jerusalem, as he's coming into, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it. How often I would have gathered you and gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood or her chicks, her family, and you under her wings, and you were not willing." You were not willing. And I always thought to myself when I read it, isn't that interesting? Jesus, a male, a Jewish male too, by the way, in which many would consider a patriarchal society. God we know as, we just said, Father. And here Jesus, instead of saying, you know what I mean, I was like a dad, you know what I mean, who took down the kids who were trying to, you know what I mean, bully my kids. Or, I was like a soldier who put his shield up so his friends would not, go after them. He doesn't say that. He says, "How I long to gather you as a hen gathers her chicks." What's up with that? Ar-Rahum is up with that. That's God's mercy to a people who kill those who God sends to them to set them straight, who stones those sent to them, who they're called the ones who kick against the goads, you see, who resist God. But you were not willing, he says. But not only do we see basically the mercy as innate in the character of God, because that's, of course, as we see it is, but we know that it's inherent in God's dealings with humanity itself. Just as in Matthew, in terms of what we just read, likewise in Ephesians chapter 2, you can bring that one up. Ephesians chapter 2, verses 4 through 6, basically. And it says this, "But God, being rich in mercy, because of the great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead, even when we were morta, when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive." We were dead. He made us alive with Christ. By grace, you have been saved. And he raised us up with him and seated us with him in heavenly places in Christ. We were lowly. Matter of fact, when you read Luke, we're doing a study in the Bible study is in Luke. And when you read Luke, and particularly you read the first couple of chapters, Mary's Magnificat. And what does she talk about? How God takes the lowly and raises them up. He takes the lowly, seats us at the right hand of the Father with Christ. Because why? We are the body of Christ. We make up Christ, you see, as his people. Where he is, that's where we are. With him. Which means, by the by, and I hope it does mean to you this, that is that heavenly place, right? That means our perspective should be different. Instead of having this perspective only, we have a different perspective. We have a different way of looking at things from a heavenly, kingdom, Christ, godly perspective. We are seated with him in this place. He has taken the least. He has taken the lost and the broken from their humble position and placed them with him. It doesn't mean, by the way, that we are to stay static. I always like to make sure I throw in that. We have this thing that says, come as you are, right? How many times have you heard? Come as you are. But the tagline should be that, but however, because you're not going to stay as you are. You may come as you are, of course, come as you are. But you won't be staying where you are. It's an impossibility if you truly are coming in and giving your life. You can come as you are, sure, of course, but you won't be staying as you are. Because if you are staying as you are, then then that's something different. Then we have to go back to those other scriptures. We have to go back to Matthew 23. Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. Except he's using my name. Oh, Lulu. That's where his Manny. He always calls me Lulu. Hey, Lulu. You stoned the prophets. You people come and tell you stuff, but what do? You do nothing. What do you do with it? It's a warning, right? We may come as we are, but we don't stay that way. We don't stay static in our stuff, basically. Very important. We stay, actually, we should be, when we come to Christ, we should be gratefully pliable. That's how I like to look at it. Being gratefully pliable. I could come as I am, but I am grateful. But I am gratefully pliable. I can be molded and shaped. But mercy is not only innate in the character of God and inherent in the people of God, it is also incorporated, inherent in the dealings of God with humanity, but it's also incorporated therefore it's incorporated in the people of God. Luke chapter 6, verse 36, it'll come up. Bingo. Be merciful. How? Even as your Father is merciful. Be merciful. He is merciful. Be merciful as he is merciful. And it sounds like basically the story of the Good Samaritan. Go and do likewise. We are to be merciful just as God is merciful and shows us mercy. How are we to do that, and what way might we? Matter of fact, I'm going to show you a video real quick. This is of John Wimber. It's a very poor video in terms of video quality, and the sound is cool. All right, so you can.
And I had a vision. It was the first one I'd ever had. Really clear graphic. And I'm driving along.
Go back. And anyway, there we go. And so you're going to hear, basically, you can start from the beginning. This is Wimber, basically, at church, I think it is. But what he's doing is he's referring to a vision he had from the Lord. He actually had this vision. He didn't say he had a lot of vision, but he had this literal vision from the Lord. So why don't we go ahead and start that from the beginning and go.
And I'm driving along, and I had a vision. It was the first one I'd ever had. Really clear graphic. And I'm driving along, and it's a beautiful morning. And well, of course it would be. And I'm driving along, and all of a sudden, over the landscape, superimposed over it, as far as I could see. It's what looks like a cloud bank, and it's going all the way across the sky. And I look at it, and I realize it's not a cloud bank, it's a honeycomb. You ever seen a honeycomb when it comes? Yeah. All right, it's dripping. And below the cloud bank, the honeycomb, are people. And they're in all kinds of different postures. Some of them are very reverent. They're weeping. They've got their hands out and they're catching this honey. And some of them are sharing it with their friends. And other people are coming and dipping their finger in other people's honey. And other people are really irritated. Trying to get out of this honey. And they don't like it. And I'm looking at this thing, and I'm so excited. I pull over the side of the road and I'm sitting there looking at it. And I said, God, what is it? What is it? And he said, John, that's my mercy. He says, for some people, it's a blessing. And for some people, it's not. He said, John, don't ever beg me for healing again. Look at it. There's plenty for everyone. John, the problem isn't on my end. The problem is down there where you are. That was one of the most profound and moving experiences I've ever had. And I've never looked at healing the same way again. I've never gone into the sick and dying's room in the hospital. I've never looked at a child that was in desperate condition. I've watched my friends die and prayed for them, but I've never, ever known the desperation of soul that I knew before that moment. Because I know the problem isn't on his end. Our God has sent mercy in the Son. He sent his word to heal them. Jesus has come. He brought a message of love from the Father. Healing is here. The problem is appropriating it, getting blessed in it, receiving it. Over the next few days, we'll talk to you about many other aspects of this incredible experience of learning how to move in the power of God. Let's all stand.
Not you guys. All right, so anyway, it is, when we think of the history of the Vineyard, it starts with John. And we're thinking of mercy ministry itself specifically. Really comes from this. It comes from this heart to actually see God's mercy actually received from others. To actually offer it and to actually see it. And mercy, however, didn't mean just, for instance, just praying for someone and healing and this kind of thing. It actually encompasses all that what we do in terms of people coming in the door broken in some way. It could be people who are dealing with issues of John. Matter of fact, because of this, he started a large food ministry that they had there at the church. And matter of fact, people would come. People would come and get food, but they would, of course, get prayer while they're getting food and these kinds of things. Matter of fact, mercy ministry always included my wife and I traveling out to Cincinnati one time. It had to do, and we had that church out there in the Vineyard. They used to throw Matthews parties. They used to actually go out and deliver food all over these really rough neighborhoods. And then what they would do, for 2 hours, then after about a month or two, they would have this big, huge party right in the center of the hood there. They'd have this big, huge party. And they'd be clowns and balloons and all kinds of stuff. Why? Because not only they were feeding people, but guess what? Then there was this inner circle where the thing was happening, but then there's people who brought the people, and so next thing you know, we're talking to them about the Lord and praying with people, and there's different rings. Matter of fact, there were bloods. And they were the bloods up there on the hill, you know what I mean? They were all looking like this, down at what we were doing down there, and this kind of thing. It was just, mercy ministry encompassed all of it for the Vineyard, not just some part or some single part of it, you see. And that comes really from John. But our engagement ourselves in this church in mercy ministry, Vineyard, for us, they were envisioned even years before I even had the church. Matter of fact, that I used to go pray when I was at work down at West Point. I would go very early in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would just literally just spend hours in prayer there before everybody showed up. And then we had like this grease board, and I would actually write down things that I thought the Lord wanted the church to look like. Matter of fact, Ray probably still has the file back there somewhere, and I would write down all the impressions I had, and not going through all of them, but one of them was this whole idea of mercy ministry, if you will, this whole idea of having a food pantry. And I always felt like we were supposed to take care of those who are hungry. It's one of the things. Maybe that was because of being Italian as well. Something about food and people going hungry. I just can't take it. And so the thing is that's all we would. So we start. So even before we had a church, before we had gathered the first person, my wife and I and two boys basically sitting over there, and we would go buy groceries for like 3 families. We'd throw them in the back of the car and we'd head down the Beacon. And there was a really rough spot back in those days anyway. It was a really rough place down there in Beacon. I tried to find the roughest place I possibly could. And it was a really rough place. And we go there. And I can't tell you the whole story, but I remember knocking on the super's door, young guy, won't get into that, but this guy, and I said, hey, does anybody know anybody around here who needs food? And he goes, yeah, apartment so-and-so, they can't, he just lost his job, he's got no, rent, da-da-da-da-da, blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, so we go over there. And of course, when we first go there, they would open up the door maybe about like that. They'd open up this little crack like that. They'd open up the door. I said, hey, man, I understand, some of you guys need some food, this kind of thing. Well, why? I just happen to have some extra groceries, if you want. I said, I'll leave them out here. So we left them out there. And we'd come back the next week, and they'd open the door about this much. And then we'd come back the third week, and they open up the door about that. Next thing you know, they're opening up the door. We're coming in. We're walking in. And these things. And then when we started gathering people for the church, next thing you know, other people started joining us. And we just had a home group in a house. And then, so it was just not one car going, there was 2 cars going down. Then there was 3 cars going down. Then there was 4 cars going down. And then we would also see not only the, feeding of those who were in need, the least in that sense, but then we would, of course, we'd offer prayer. And I can remember one time, if I told the story here, if I did it in Bible study, I can't remember. But because it was not a good neighborhood, believe me, I'm telling you right now, it was not a good place, not a great neighborhood. And so what we would do is I'd say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go deliver the food. But this is what we're going to do. I say, you got such and such amount of time, and everybody back here at this time. Everybody's back here, so we know everybody's okay. So you're coming back here at this time, okay? So you do your deliveries and then come back, okay? So all right, so they'd send them off 2 by 2, send them off, go out. And then all of a sudden, we're all back there except for 2 people, my wife and this one of the early matriarchs of the church. Her name was Debbie Baker. And God bless her. And she's passed since. But, and so I'm like, okay, where's Patty and where's Deb? Anybody know where Patty is? No, I don't know. Oh, now Lou. Where's Patty and Deb? Where's Patty and Deb? Okay, 5 minutes go by. It feels like 2 hours. Even if it was like 5 minutes. All of a sudden I'm like, all right, I've got to go find them. Okay, we're going to send everybody out to go find these guys and where they're at, these kind of things. Then all of a sudden, as soon as we were going to leave to go find out where they are, all of a sudden here they come up the alleyway. We see them coming up the alleyway, 2 of them. And they were like, I'm like, where were you guys? You're supposed to be back at a certain time, blah, blah. And they said, well, they invited us in because why? Because there was this woman in there, and, she hadn't got out of bed in 3 weeks or something like that. She hasn't been out of bed in 3 weeks. She's been laid up. They think she may not make it. You know what I mean? And she's in bed, this kind of thing. And so as they're relaying this story to me, all of a sudden this window opens up in one of the big apartments there, opens up, and this woman, she's going like this, hey, I'm better. How you going? She's out of bed. She's trying to get our attention. How, you know what I mean? She's out of bed and she's doing how awesome she's doing because those guys went up and prayed for her. You see, it's mercy, the honeycomb. You see, the mercy dripping down from heaven. You see, and people to receive that mercy. And it can come in the form of food. It can come in the form of prayer and healing. It can come in so many different forms, right? It can come in, for us, even prayer, not just in terms of we'll offer prayer this morning or in your home groups, wherever it might be, but then we even started a group thing called personal ministry. It was restoring the foundations. There was a couple, the Kleins, we started with that, and where individual people would try to get prayer because why? Because they just was having difficulty overcoming some stuff. And Dave and Roe had taken that over and seen many people go through that. But then one of our biggest ministries here, which we started from the beginning, was on my grease board that we were going to have some sort of, a recovery ministry, a Christian-based recovery ministry. This is before I had the church. Christian-based recovery ministry. So I'd always be praying about and seeking that out. And then all of a sudden, Manny Cordero shows up to church. He comes to Christ here in the church. And he was pretty broken himself, and over some stuff, he comes to know Jesus. And then, but then with him, we start what we call Celebrate Recovery, which meets on Tuesday nights, right? And what's the point of Celebrate Recovery? It's to help people in their hurts, habits, and hang-ups. That's actually the three things. To help people recover from their hurts, their habits, and their hang-ups, you see. And so many people have gone through that thing. Some people have come into the church even through that as well. That's mercy ministry. It's the showing of mercy. But what about your engagement? In terms of your own engagement, you can sign up. You can talk to Michelle. Michelle actually is running the food pantry now, of course, and for the last long time. And let me tell you right now, it has never been better than it has now. Michelle has done just an unbelievable job with that food pantry. I can't tell you, I could never do, of course, what Michelle does. Because you know and the reason is because of her passion for the least, her passion for those who come and see, exactly right. You can sign up, basically, to deliver food, or we actually have people here who actually are giving out food on certain days. You can talk to her about it, pray for people, these type of things. You can sign up for that. You can take a VDS class, particularly the display class, do that. You can get those who are already active. Maybe you know somebody who's already active in prayer, somebody who's already active in the food ministry, somebody who's already active in these things, and hang out with them. That's how we learned. That's how I learned. I just hung out with somebody who was a page ahead of me. And hung out with them, see what they did. How did they do it? You see? Just, all right, because maybe I'm a little nervous about doing it myself. So go ahead and do it. Go hang out with somebody. You see? And do it. If somebody's praying up here, okay, you don't have to pray yourself. If you've never done it, all right, stand in the back and watch them pray. That's how I would learn. See? You don't want to go buy yourself in food, and you shouldn't. Delivering food, go with somebody who's been going for a long time. You know how we spell faith around here, right? R-I-S-K. Be a good Samaritan. If you see someone in need, don't wait to go to church and tell Ray, hey, I found somebody in need. We really should do something about it. They say, well, go ahead. That's what I used to say anyway. Hey, I just found the person who's going to do it. But I thought, no, I'm talking about the church should do it. I had one guy say that one time. The church should. They said, oh, yeah, right. That's you. You found someone in need. Great. Be the good Samaritan. Go and do likewise. Okay?